Olive Parker didn't look up from her screen as the office lights flickered off around her. She was used to being the last one in the building. The dim glow of her monitor reflected in her glasses while the rest of the 29th floor of Westbridge Co. sat in eerie silence, half covered in shadows. Everyone had cleared out hours ago, but Olive was still there, finishing a client presentation that had been dumped on her desk last minute. Again, it was nearly midnight. She sighed, pulling her cardigan tighter. "Just 10 more slides," she muttered, tapping the keyboard. A faint sound echoed down the hallway, the click of expensive shoes on polished marble floors. She paused. Security, maybe? But they didn't usually come up this high. She stood and poked her head out of her cubicle. A tall man in a dark suit was walking toward the corner office, the one that had been empty for weeks since the founder retired. He had a commanding presence that made the silence feel sharper. His navy coat moved like it belonged on a cover of a luxury magazine, and his sharp jawline didn't exactly scream night janitor. He stopped when he saw her. "You're still here," he said, voice low but curious. "I could say the same about you," she replied, folding her arms. "And this floor's restricted after hours." He smiled, not cocky, just calm. "I'm allowed." Olive raised an eyebrow. "Right, and you're—" "Wesley Rhodes, owner," she blinked. "Owner," he stepped closer and extended a hand. "I just acquired majority shares in Westbridge Co." Surprise inspection. Her mouth parted. She'd heard rumors of a buyout, but no one said anything about the new owner showing up in the middle of the night like some ridiculously attractive corporate ghost. She hesitated, then shook his hand. "Olive Parker." "Marketing strategist." "Nice to meet you, Olive Parker," he said, eyes scanning her tired form. "You always work this late." "Only when management forgets I exist until things are on fire." His gaze lingered for a beat. "That's not how I want things run," she shrugged. "It's how they've always been." Wesley tilted his head. "Can I see what you're working on?" She blinked. "Now, you're already here. Humor me." Still skeptical, she led him back to her desk. He pulled up a chair beside her and leaned in, watching as she walked him through the branding pitch she'd been building for a luxury retail client. He didn't interrupt, just listened intently. His cologne was subtle and expensive, and he sat too close for her heart rate to stay normal. When she finished, he leaned back. "That's good. You sound surprised." "I'm not, just impressed." She gave a dry laugh. "So do I get a raise in my own office now?" "You might," he said, completely serious. "If you ever go home." That made her laugh again, real this time. He looked at her like he hadn't expected that sound but liked it. "I'll escort you down," he said, rising. "It's late." Olive hesitated. "You don't have to, I want to." They rode the elevator in silence, except for the quiet hum of the city below. When the doors opened in the lobby, she turned to him. "Thanks for not being a complete jerk, billionaire," he chuckled. "You say that like you've met a few." "I've worked in corporate long enough." He paused, then reached into his coat. "Here," he handed her a sleek silver business card. "Call me if you ever need anything, or just want to have coffee without a deadline hanging over your head." She took it, confused but intrigued. "Are you flirting with me?" He looked straight into her eyes. "Maybe." Then he turned and walked out the revolving doors into the night, leaving her standing in the empty lobby with her heart pounding and the faintest smile pulling at her lips. The next morning, the office was buzzing. "Did you hear? The new owner came by last night," someone whispered near the coffee machine. "Apparently, he's some tech billionaire who bought the company to diversify his portfolio." "Wesley Rhodes," someone else added. "He's worth billions, billions. And he's hot." Olive sat quietly at her desk, heart thudding harder than it should. She looked down at the silver card still sitting in her bag and bit her lip. She wasn't the type of girl billionaires flirted with. She was the stay late and get ignored type, but he'd listened. He'd watched her. And he hadn't looked away once. That night, she packed up at a normal hour for once and made it to the exit before anyone else. As she stepped into the cool night air, a sleek black car pulled up at the curb. A driver got out and opened the door. "Miss Parker," she froze. "Yes, Mr. Rhodes requests your company for dinner." Her jaw dropped. "What?" he said. "To tell you it's casual and that there's no pressure." The driver smiled. "But the reservation is at a place that doesn't take walk-ins." Her heart stuttered. She should say no, she had laundry. She had leftovers in her fridge. She didn't own anything remotely worthy of a billionaire's restaurant, but her feet moved anyway. She slid into the back seat. And there he was, Wesley, waiting in a crisp white shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up, looking at her like she wasn't just another employee. Like he saw her. "You came," he said with that soft smile. "I don't know why," she admitted. "I do," he said, "because I couldn't stop thinking about you either." The car pulled away from the curb and Olive sat back, nerves dancing in her stomach, unsure what this was. But knowing deep down, it was the start of something she'd never expected. The restaurant sat tucked above a gallery in Tribeca, its entrance hidden behind a frosted glass panel that slid open only when the driver entered a code. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant with saffron, truffle, and something faintly citrus. The walls were dark, the lighting low and golden, and every table was spaced far enough apart to keep conversations private. Wesley stood as Olive entered behind the maitre d', his expression unreadable. "No dress code?" she asked as she took the seat across from him, tugging at the edge of her blazer. "I meant it when I said casual," he replied. "The food's serious. The rest isn't." A waiter appeared without prompting and placed 2 menus in front of them before gliding away. Olive scanned hers, her brow rising slightly. "I didn't know you could get a waiting list for risotto. You can if a French prince once flew in just to eat it." She glanced up. "You're not joking. Never about risotto." He poured her a glass of water from the crystal pitcher between them, then leaned back. The quiet hum of jazz filled the space between them, but Wesley's gaze was steady. "You always take employees to secret restaurants after hours?" she asked. "I don't usually notice employees the way I noticed you." She looked down, unsure what to do with that kind of directness. "You barely met me. I noticed how you didn't flinch when I said who I was. I noticed you didn't sugarcoat the state of things. And I noticed how thorough your work was, even at midnight." Olive folded her napkin. "That doesn't mean you know me." "I'd like to," he said simply. "If you'll let me." She didn't answer at first. A waiter returned and took their orders, Wesley choosing something in Italian that Olive didn't recognize, and Olive going for the safest name she could pronounce. Once they were alone again, she tapped a finger against her glass. "Why Westbridge?" she asked. "Out of everything you could have bought." He took a moment, as if weighing how much to share. "My mother used to work for them back when it was still small. She was a receptionist, took the train an hour each way. They let her go after 12 years without even a severance check." Olive blinked. "That's awful." "It was," he said. "I was in high school. I promised myself I'd own the place one day. You bought the company out of revenge." "No," he said, voice low. "I bought it so no one like her ever gets discarded again. But I didn't come here tonight to talk about that." Their food arrived, plated like art. Olive took a bite and closed her eyes. "Okay, this is the best thing I've ever tasted." "I told you." She opened her eyes but didn't meet his. "This is weird for me. You're not what I expected." Wesley lifted an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" "Cold, distant, maybe a little patronizing." "And now, I don't know yet." He nodded as if accepting that. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything. This isn't a performance review disguised as dinner." "Good." "Because I didn't prepare notes." That made him grin. "You're refreshing." She tilted her head. "You can stop with the charm." "It's not charm if it's true." They ate in silence for a while. Olive tried not to think about how her hands kept brushing her lap to keep from fidgeting. Wesley barely touched his phone, only glancing at it once when it buzzed before turning it face down. "You have an accent," she said suddenly. "Not much, but it's there." He looked up. "I was raised in London till I was 10, then we moved to Chicago. I switch depending on who I'm talking to." Sounds like code for I can fake being approachable. More like I can adapt when it matters. She dipped a piece of bread in oil. "You always adapt through billion-dollar acquisitions. Only when the stakes are high." She froze mid-chew. "What are the stakes here?" Wesley didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope, placing it gently on the table between them. "What's this?" "Your promotion," she blinked. "Excuse me, marketing director, effective immediately." "I saw your numbers, your presentations, your team feedback. You should have been promoted months ago." Her hands stayed still on the edge of the table. "This isn't because I agreed to dinner." No, this was already decided before I asked you. She stared at him, searching for a catch. I don't know if I'm flattered or suspicious. Both are acceptable. She reached for the envelope but didn't open it. This changes everything. If it changes how you see me, I understand. It doesn't, she said slowly, but it changes how I see myself. Wesley leaned forward. I want you to see yourself the way I did the moment I walked into that office last night. And how was that? Capable, brilliant, and completely unaware of how powerful you could be. The intensity in his voice made her heart kick hard in her chest, but she forced herself to stay composed. I don't date people I work for, she said, voice quiet. Then I'll make sure you don't work for me, he replied just as softly. You'll report directly to the board, no chains between us. She narrowed her eyes. You thought this through. I don't act on impulse. Not when it comes to people who matter. Olive looked down at her hands, then at the envelope. You move fast, only when it feels right. The waiter returned with dessert menus, but neither of them opened theirs. I'd like to walk you home, Wesley said, his tone gentler now. Olive hesitated, then nodded. All right. Outside, the air was crisp. The city buzzed around them, but their steps fell into quiet rhythm. Wesley didn't press her with more questions, didn't fill the silence, just stayed beside her as if the space shared between them carried its own weight. When they reached her building, Olive turned to him. This was unexpected. I hope that doesn't mean unwelcome. She considered him this man who had rewritten the rules of the game within 24 hours and shook her head. No, just... Complicated? I can handle complicated, he said, stepping closer, but only if you let me. She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned in and pressed a brief kiss to his cheek. Good night, Wesley. Then she disappeared into her building, leaving him on the sidewalk with that same unreadable expression, but this time his eyes lingered on the door long after it closed behind her. 3 days passed before Olive saw Wesley again. During those 72 hours, her promotion had been quietly announced in an internal memo, her new title etched onto the glass wall of an office that overlooked the skyline, and her responsibilities multiplied with dizzying speed. There were strategy meetings, boardroom presentations, and a team of 10 now reporting directly to her. The shift was swift, seamless, and overwhelmingly surreal, but Wesley hadn't appeared. No calls, no unexpected dinners, just silence. And Olive couldn't decide if she was relieved or disappointed. On the 4th morning, a courier delivered a long black envelope to her desk, no note, no return address. Inside was a single ticket to an exclusive art exhibit preview held in a private penthouse gallery in Soho. Her name was printed on the back in elegant script, no +1. She stared at it for a long time. That evening, she stood at the gallery entrance, wearing a sleek navy dress she'd borrowed from her friend Nora. Her heels clicked against the marble as she stepped inside, the room glowing with soft amber light. Sculptures made of blown glass rose from the floor like frozen waves, and oil paintings lined the walls in gilded frames. Wesley was standing near a large window, speaking with a tall woman in a steel gray suit. When he caught sight of Olive, his entire posture shifted, their eyes locked. He excused himself and crossed the room, glass of champagne in hand. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, offering her the drink. I wasn't sure either, she replied, taking it. You look. He paused, eyes scanning her, not in a lascivious way, but with the weight of someone seeing something that mattered. Like you belong in every room you walk into, she stared at him. You invited me here to flatter me. No. I invited you because I wanted you to see something. He gestured toward a painting at the far end, a large oil piece of a woman standing on a rooftop, city lights behind her, wind pulling her coat open like wings. The colors bled into one another, chaotic but beautiful. It's called Unseen, Wesley said. The artist painted it after 6 years of rejection from galleries. She only got discovered when a collector accidentally found her work stacked in a flea market. Olive stepped closer. That's why I bought the whole collection, he finished. People like her don't get seen unless someone forces the world to look. She turned, eyes narrowing. Are you trying to say I'm like her? No, he responded. I'm saying you're the exception who should have been the rule. Emotion prickled behind her ribs, unexpected, sharp. You don't even know what I've been through. Then tell me, he said, voice low but steady. Tell me what made you fight this hard. She hesitated, then looked away. My dad walked out when I was 9. My mom worked 2 jobs and still couldn't pay the mortgage. I swore I'd never depend on anyone. I worked through college, slept in my car for 2 semesters, and clawed my way into Westbridge through a temp agency. I've had 3 promotions that were passed over, 1 project stolen, and 2 bosses who didn't know my name. Wesley didn't interrupt. I didn't want charity from you, she added. I earned that job. I never thought otherwise. She looked up, surprised at his certainty. I didn't promote you because I wanted to impress you. I did it because the company would be an idiot not to, and I didn't invite you here to talk business. I invited you because I wanted you to see that I recognize people who fight, because I was one. She stepped back, needing space. Then why disappear for 3 days? Because I didn't want to blur lines. I wanted your promotion to stand on its own. Not get tangled in whatever this is between us. Olive's voice was quiet. And what is this? He studied her for a long moment. Something I haven't felt in years. Something I didn't expect when I walked into that office and saw you hunched over your laptop like the rest of the world didn't exist. A waiter passed by with a tray of canapés, but neither of them moved. I don't want to be someone's project, Olive said. I don't want to be someone you try to fix. I'm not trying to fix you, he said. I'm trying to be near you. She looked away, throat tight. This is complicated. It doesn't have to be, but it is, she said. You're the owner of the company I just got promoted in. People talk. People assume. I'll sell my shares tomorrow if that's what it takes. Olive's head whipped around. What? I don't care about optics. I care about you. And if stepping away means I can take you to dinner without it feeling like a headline, I'll do it. She stared at him like he'd just offered to set the moon on fire for her. You'd walk away from $1 billion acquisition for a woman you've known less than a week. I'd walk away from anything that makes you feel small, her breath caught. For a long time, neither of them spoke, then a voice cut through the crowd. Wesley Rhodes, called a man in a velvet blazer. I need your opinion on this piece over here. Wesley turned to Olive. Do you want to stay? Or would you rather leave and get dinner somewhere that doesn't serve wine with a backstory? She hesitated, then nodded. Let's go. Outside, the air was sharp with winter, and the sidewalk glistened from a light mist. A matte black Aston Martin waited at the curb, the driver already opening the passenger door. She stopped before getting in. If this is going to work, I need to know something, anything. What happens when this stops being exciting and starts being real? Wesley reached for her hand. Then we stop pretending it's supposed to be easy. And we start building something that is. She studied him, her heart pounding in rhythm with the city. Then she slid into the car and he followed. The door closed behind them, sealing out the noise. And for the first time in a long time, Olive let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible anymore. The following week unfolded differently than anything Olive had ever experienced. Her days were a blur of strategy sessions, high-level client meetings, and a seat at tables she had once only passed by on her way to refill coffee. But it wasn't just the responsibility that felt new, it was the weight of being seen, the pressure of presence. Every word she spoke in those meetings mattered now. Every decision left a ripple. Wesley didn't hover. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't disrupt her workday, but he was present in the subtle shifts around her. Her new office had a view of the river. Her assistant, Mia, had already anticipated her schedule preferences. A rare first edition of a marketing text she had once casually mentioned appeared on her shelf, its spine pristine, and then there was the dinner. Wesley invited her to a private tasting held on the rooftop of a culinary institute, an event not advertised, not publicized, and accessible only by a coded elevator that led to a glass terrace surrounded by candlelight and string lights wound delicately through potted olive trees. The irony of the trees didn't escape her, but she said nothing. They sat at a table for 2, no menus, no staff visible beyond the singular chef who emerged intermittently to present each course with quiet reverence. You've been quiet, Wesley said as he poured her a glass of a Bordeaux she couldn't pronounce. I've been thinking, she replied, about whether I'm brave enough to be happy. He set the bottle down. That's not something I expected. I thought success would feel like a finish line. But it feels like a spotlight, and now that I'm here, I'm wondering if I even know how to enjoy it. Wesley didn't fill the silence with comfort. Instead, he waited, letting her finish the thought on her own. I've spent so long trying not to drown that I don't know how to float, she added, softer now. You don't have to float alone. She looked up. I don't want to be dependent, then be partnered. He said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. She pushed her plate slightly forward. What happens when you get bored of the challenge? When the newness fades? Wesley leaned closer. I've been in rooms with royalty, sat through deals worth more than most cities, and I've never felt as alive as I did watching you take over that quarterly strategy meeting without flinching. That's not exactly romantic. It is to me. She studied him, the flicker of candles reflecting in his eyes. You're not offering me a fairy tale. No, I'm offering you a reality where you're the center of gravity. Olive swallowed, her heart pressing against her ribs. Did you always plan on this? I planned on making the company better. I didn't expect to fall in love with the person who already was. The word landed hard. She stared at him, her mouth parted slightly. You said love. I meant love. There was no performance in his voice, no dramatics, just a certainty that made the rest of the world feel irrelevant. I haven't said it back. I didn't ask you to. But I might, she said. He smiled, not with triumph, but with a softness that made her chest ache. Later, as they stepped into the elevator, the city stretching beneath them like a sea of lights, Olive reached for his hand. My lease is up in 2 months, he glanced at her. And I'm not saying I'm moving in, I'm just saying there are possibilities. I've been looking at a place in Gramercy, he said. It has a library and a ridiculous kitchen I'll never use. She squeezed his hand. Maybe I will. The following week, Wesley invited her to an event hosted at the New York Philharmonic. Olive arrived wearing a simple black gown, her hair swept up, and as she stepped into the vaulted lobby, heads turned not because of Wesley, but because of her. People are staring, she whispered as they climbed the marble steps. They should, he said. They're lucky to be witnessing the beginning of an empire. At the top of the stairs, he reached into his coat and pulled out a slim velvet box. Olive's breath caught. That better not be a ring. It's not, he said. He opened it to reveal a key, a sleek silver one with her initials engraved on the bow. What is this, my place in Gramercy? I'm not asking you to move in. I'm asking you to be part of building something. No promises on timelines, just possibility. She took the box and closed her hand around it. You're relentless. That's how I built everything I have, and now you want to build with me. I want to build around you. She slipped the key into her clutch and leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. Don't ever lose that nerve. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. Not if you keep giving me reasons to keep it. The music that night was sweeping, cinematic, and Olive sat in the private box beside Wesley, his hand resting lightly on her knee. But it wasn't the music or the luxury or the exclusivity that made her breath catch. It was the feeling that for the first time she wasn't just surviving. She was living, and she wasn't alone. Months later, Olive stood in the glass-walled conference room of Westbridge, presenting a global rebranding campaign to a room full of executives who now looked to her as their guiding voice. She spoke with clarity, assurance, and a quiet command that came not from fear, but from earned power. As she finished, the room erupted in applause. Wesley stood just outside the glass, watching from the hallway but not entering. He didn't need to. She didn't need saving. She never had. Later that evening, on the rooftop of their Gramercy apartment, a small dinner party of friends and colleagues buzzed with laughter as string lights danced in the breeze. Wesley came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You never told me what you thought of the library, he murmured. I thought I'd never leave it, she replied. He turned her gently to face him, a single velvet ring box in his palm. She stared at it, then at him. I thought you said that key wasn't a proposal. It wasn't, he said. But this is. She opened it slowly, heart thundering, no crowd, no press, just them, just the stars. Yes, she whispered. He pulled her in. And they kissed beneath the New York skyline, not as an employee and her billionaire boss, not as a rescue story or a workplace scandal, but as two people who had found each other in the quiet moments after midnight and built a future loud enough to echo across the city. And Olive, who once worked late and went unnoticed, now stood at the center of a life she had built with the man who saw her when no one else had. Rain had started to fall just as the last of the guests left their rooftop celebration, soft and steady, tapping gently against the glass doors. Inside, the city lights shimmered through the droplets like scattered diamonds. Olive stood barefoot in the living room, her engagement ring catching the light as she turned it slowly between her fingers. Wesley stepped out of the bedroom, now barefoot too, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a towel in one hand. He handed it to her without a word, watching as she dried her hair absently. "I didn't expect it to rain," she said. "Neither did I," he replied, voice low, "but I like it. Feels like the city's slowing down to celebrate with us." She looked over her shoulder. "You always have a poetic explanation ready." He moved to her side. "No, only when I'm standing next to you." Olive leaned into his warmth, the quiet between them no longer filled with questions or uncertainties. She had always been the one to second-guess, to prepare for the worst, but now she felt only calm. Maybe it was the rain, maybe it was the ring. Maybe it was that, for the first time in her life, love wasn't something she had to fight for. "Have you told the board yet?" she asked without looking up. "They'll hear by morning," he answered. "I already scheduled the transition. I'm stepping down as acting chair. I'll stay a silent investor, but the company's yours to shape now, without me in the spotlight." She turned to face him fully. "That wasn't necessary. It was right," he said simply. "You've built something they finally recognize." "I won't let anyone say it was because of me." Olive reached for his hand. "You gave me the space to rise. That's not weakness, Wesley, that's love." He kissed her forehead. "I know." The next day, Olive walked into the Westbridge headquarters, not as someone in Wesley's orbit, but as the new chief strategy officer. The title was official. The responsibilities were hers, and no one whispered anymore. There were no glances, just respect earned, not given. Her first initiative had nothing to do with profits. She launched a mentorship program for overlooked junior staff, the kind of people who stayed late and skipped lunch, just like she once did. The ones who were brilliant but invisible. Wesley, meanwhile, had shifted entirely into philanthropic ventures. He leased a modest corner office in a nonprofit incubator near Union Square and started funding education initiatives anonymously. He didn't need more companies. He needed meaning. One afternoon, Olive stopped by unannounced, 2 coffees in hand. She pushed open the door to his office, finding him cross-legged on the floor surrounded by grant proposals and a whiteboard filled with scribbled arrows and statistics. "You look like a startup founder in 2009, she said, handing him a cup. "I feel like one," he said, accepting it gratefully. "Did you know there are over 500 underfunded schools in this state alone?" She sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're going to fix that, aren't you?" "Not alone," he murmured. "I want us to do it together." They spent the afternoon planning a new foundation, one that would blend Olive's marketing brilliance with Wesley's vision, a real legacy, something honest, something lasting. Their wedding was small, held in a botanical conservatory in upstate New York. Just family, close friends, and the soft sound of wind rustling through glass walls covered in ivy. Olive wore a simple dress with a high neckline and no train. Wesley wore a navy suit with no tie. They exchanged vows beneath a canopy of wisteria, their words quiet but certain. During the reception, Olive's mother pulled her aside. "He's not what I expected," she said, watching Wesley laugh with Olive's college roommate as if they'd known each other for years. "I know," Olive replied. "Neither was I." They honeymooned in the Scottish Highlands, where the air was cold but the fireplaces were warm. They stayed in a renovated castle turned in, with a view of the loch and no cell signal. It was the first time Olive had gone more than 2 days without checking her inbox. On their last night there, they stood wrapped in a single blanket, watching the stars. "I used to think love meant giving yourself up," she murmured. "But with you, I feel more like myself than I ever have." Wesley kissed her temple. That's how I know it's real. Back in New York, life didn't slow down, it evolved. They kept their Gramercy apartment but bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, one with creaky floors and a small library where Olive spent Sunday mornings barefoot with a mug of tea and a manuscript she was secretly drafting. A memoir about visibility, power, and the strange magic of being chosen without being changed. Wesley added a rooftop greenhouse. Olive added a dog named Finch. They argued about furniture, made up over pastries, and built a rhythm that was all their own years past. The mentorship program produced its first junior partner. The foundation expanded into 5 new cities. Wesley's name stayed out of the press by design, and Olive's rose naturally, steadily. One spring morning, Olive stood in their kitchen, hair still messy, wearing one of Wesley's old shirts, reading the front page of a business magazine. Her face was on the cover. Wesley walked in barefoot, coffee in hand. He paused when he saw it. "You didn't tell me they interviewed you?" "I didn't want to jinx it," she said, grinning. "They called me the architect of modern strategy." He leaned against the counter. "They got it wrong." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you're the architect of everything?" She crossed the kitchen and kissed him, slow and easy. Later that day, they attended a gala, this time not as guests but as honorees. Olive gave a speech about vision, voice, and the power of being seen. Wesley stood beside her, not in the spotlight, but close enough to catch her when she stepped down from the stage. And that night, as they danced in a room full of chandeliers and velvet, Olive rested her head against his chest and whispered, "I didn't know life could be like this." He kissed her hair, his voice steady. "This is only the beginning," and it was. Every day after that, in 100 small ways, they chose each other over the noise, over the doubts, over the easy path. They chose love that built things. Love that stayed forever.